Hey, and we're back. I'm your host, BKP. It's been a long morning, but we're not done. As they say, I will say this nicely, don't confuse this with an endorsement, sir, but we saved the best for last, okay? we are now joined by Senator Josh McKoon, who is a Republican primary candidate for Secretary of State. How are you doing this morning, Mr. McKoon?
I'm doing great. I hope you're doing well. I appreciate you having me on this morning.
Well, you know, we really, in North Georgia, we got to know you very well throughout your time in the Senate. You spent a lot of time on some different subjects and legislation that you did crisscross the state. How did your time in the Senate prepare you and some of the statewide legislation you have worked on in the past several years? How did that prepare you for the statewide race you're in now?
Well, definitely some of the issues I took on during my 8 years in the General Assembly, ethics reform, religious freedom legislation, we sought to solicit grassroots support from every corner of the state, not just my Senate district. And so, thankfully, I've made some great friendships and relationships over the years through those efforts. And a lot of those folks, you know, want to see me be successful in this campaign and have lent me their reputations over the last 10 months as we've been crisscrossing the state trying to tell people about our message to make Georgia the fastest state in the nation to get a job and the toughest state in the nation to cast an illegal vote.
Well, let me ask you this. Last night, our current Secretary of State, which is running for Governor Brian Kemp, in the debate last night, he was one of his opponents took him to task concerning, and maybe you could clear this up, because some candidates run on some promises without actually knowing if they could fulfill them. And the reason I say that is he was taken to task about small business tax fees on taxes on the registration and so forth, and the current Secretary of State said so many of those, and it's, I'm not being specific or not, but so many of the fees are actually state legislative amounts that are set through the state. Not to put him on the spot, but is that correct? And what would be the process of changing fees for different things and how things are structured in the Secretary of State's office?
Yeah, so the fee schedule for filing corporate paperwork is generally set by statute. There are some fees that are set for expedited service, like if you want something turned around the same day or next day. And the Secretary of State has some discretion in setting those fees. So I guess you could say they both people had a point in that discussion. You would need some legislative help to overhaul the entire fee schedule. So I mean, you would have to have a bill. So
when you say well, I don't mean to interrupt you, sir, but when you say legislative help, well, what you're saying is if any candidates out there promising to cut this fee and then this fee and then that, your authorities end at expedited fees. So if I was going to Secretary of State's website and say, you know, hey, you know, I want to do this, but I want it in the 2-day, not the usual 7 to 10 or 2-week window, you can put a 2-day fee that you could waive or change, but the actual fee for the license or any of those fees are actually a fee schedule that is set by the state?
That's correct.
Okay, so anybody that's promising to eliminate those needs to follow up with saying, is there any fees or anything on the fee schedule that where a Secretary of State, Josh McKoon, would readjust, ask for different legislation, or you think it's unnecessary?
Yeah, I think that the expedite process, what I think we need to do is we need to publish a schedule for how quickly we'll turn around a filing if you just pay the regular fee. And then we need to be accountable on that. But for people to be paying $1,000 for same-day turnaround of filings, I think is excessive. And I think the 250-day expedite fee for next-day service is excessive. When I started doing corporate paperwork as part of my law practice, you paid a $100 fee to file it. You paid a $100 fee if you wanted expedited service, and I thought that was a fair system.
All right, we're seeing a lot of commercials now. Obviously, some of your opponents have self-funded their campaigns, loaned themselves a lot of money, and have made some major media purchases. But one candidate in particular, I'm watching some of the ads, and I'm not understanding how they pertain to the authorities of the Secretary of State. Are people being misled on some of the authorities the Secretary of State has in that office and what that office can actually do? And can you be specific, if any?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're talking about some of the advertising that's referencing human trafficking and I think even the illegal drugs.
Yeah, I mean, I watched the ad, and as a student of state government, I'm thinking, you don't even have the authority to even, I mean, that's not on your daily list when you get up in the morning as Secretary of State.
Right. I mean, that's really, to the extent there's any statewide officer that's got purview over that, it's the Attorney General. And, Secretary of State has a wide-ranging set of responsibilities, but they're basically corporate filings, elections administration, professional licensing, securities and charities regulation, and there are a handful of other smaller functions. But, busting up criminal gangs or, ending human trafficking or doing something about the drug trade, while those are all noble policy goals, they're not really anything within the purview of the Secretary of State's office.
Okay, we have heard so much, and I don't want to rehash it because you are on your last day of campaigning, and we have heard so much about election machines and paper trail, and we've heard that over and over and over. Share with our voters, because elections do run through the Secretary of State's office. You do certify the elections and send them up the chain to the federal government or to the state. That being said, what are the most concerning things that you need to be aware of as the next Secretary of State for the 2020 election coming up? What does a Josh McKoon Secretary of State office have to prepare for, have to be aware of, and have to make sure that you enforce or stay on your toes?
Well, we're operating in a complicated legal environment. And the thing that really sets me apart from the rest of the candidates for this office on the Republican and the Democratic side is I'm the only one with election law experience. I'm the only one that's gone into court and litigated election law issues. And we're going to have a lot of election law issues coming forward. Secretary Kemp, Secretary Handel, they all got sued routinely by folks on the far left who know they can't change Georgia election law in the legislature, so they've moved from the state house to the courthouse. And so you need somebody in this office that can anticipate those challenges, act in a way to try to avoid those challenges, or be in a position to vigorously defend them. And that's going to be really important, because the left's going to do whatever they can to try to put their thumb on the scale through the courthouse before Donald Trump's on the ballot for re-election.
And you're determined to be able to battle the incoming left attacks through the court system?
Absolutely. I think I'm the only one in this race who has a clear record of fighting the left and not cutting and running. I mean, this whole religious freedom debate for the last 4 years, whatever you think about the merits of this particular issue, the Democrats absolutely put it in their crosshairs. They were coming after us. I didn't give them an inch. We were able to get the bill through the legislature. Of course, it did get vetoed, but 4 of the leading Republican candidates for governor have pledged to sign it into law. And that's what a bold leader does. A bold leader casts a vision, pursues it relentlessly. That's what I've done as a state senator. It's what I'm going to do as the next Secretary of State.
Mr. McKoon, we're going to have to run because of our next show coming up, and this is the fastest 2 hours on TV. But let me ask you a question. Last day of campaigning, what do you got going on today? And give us your final 1 minute of why voters should take a good look at Josh McKoon for Secretary of State.
So I'm in Metro Atlanta today. I'll be traveling around quite a bit this afternoon and this evening. Why people should vote for me? Very simple. This is going to be the marquee race in November. The Democrats are going to spend millions of dollars trying to steal this open seat from Republicans. You need an experienced fighter to win this election in November. You need someone who you can trust to keep their word once they get elected. And you need somebody who's competent to do the job on day one. I check all those boxes, and with your help, we're going to make Georgia the fastest state in the nation to get a job and the toughest state in the nation to cast an illegal vote.
Thank you, Mr. McKoon. We appreciate you very much. As always, we thank you for your willingness to serve, and we wish you well today in your campaign. And we look forward to talking to you Wednesday as hope maybe the winner, maybe a runoff, but we look forward to talking to you right after Tuesday.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay, well, that concludes our candidate day here. It's all the candidates we could get in. We couldn't get to everybody. We apologize for each and every one of you that are saying, why didn't you get our candidate? Why didn't you call this person? It was all the ones we could squeeze in today. We're trying to get the most out of it and get the most information for you. That is the voters. Check out our Election 2018 button. We'll be working on that today to make sure that all the information is there. Now, I do not have time because it is time for our next program, but I want you to know, I know the polls open in the morning, I think 7 a.m. in Georgia. If you want to wait to vote, I am going to open up tomorrow morning with kindly an opinion for an hour on Georgia state elections and kindly some of the races. So if you want to talk a little more about the races tomorrow morning and what you heard today with some of these candidates before you go vote, we'll do that tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. I hope this has been information for you that you can use when going to the ballot box. Don't forget, don't complain. Go vote. I don't want to hear you complaining. Go vote tomorrow in Georgia. It's now time for Instant Replay, the only live online #1 sports show every Monday. Dave Gardner's Instant Replay right after these messages. Thank you. Stay put for Instant Replay. Take us out of here.